Acronym, Wikipedia article audio. An acronym is a word or name formed as an abbreviation from the initial components in a phrase or a word, usually individual letters and sometimes syllables. There are no universal standards of the multiple names for such abbreviations and of their orthographic styling. In English and most other languages, such abbreviations historically had limited use, but they became much more common in the 20th century. Acronyms are a type of word formation process, and they are viewed as a subtype of blending. Nomenclature. Comparing a few examples of each type. Whereas an abbreviation may be any type of shortened form, such as words with the middle omitted, an acronym is a word formed from the first letter or first few letters of each word in a phrase. Attestations for acronym in German are known from 1921, and for acronym in English from 1940. Although the word acronym is often used to refer to any abbreviation formed from initial letters, some dictionaries and usage commentators define acronym to mean an abbreviation that is pronounced as a word, in contrast to an initialism, an abbreviation formed from a string of initials. Some dictionaries include additional senses equating acronym with initialism. The distinction, when made, hinges on whether the abbreviation is pronounced as a word or as a string of individual letters. Examples in reference works that make the distinction include NATO/NETO/, SCUBA/SKUB/ and radar/REDR/ for acronyms, and FBI/FBIA/, CRT/SIRTI/ and HTML/ETTIML/ for initialisms. The rest of this article uses acronym for both types of abbreviation. The distinction is not well maintained. According to Merriam-Webster's Dictionary of English Usage, a number of commentators believe that acronyms can be differentiated from other abbreviations in being pronounceable as words. Dictionaries, however, do not make this distinction because writers in general do not. Initialism, an older word than acronym, seems to be too little known to the general public to serve as the customary term, standing in contrast with acronym in a narrow sense. About the use of acronym to only mean those pronounced as words, Fowler's Modern English Usage states, the limitations of the term being not widely known to the general public, acronym is also often applied to abbreviations that are familiar but are not pronounceable as words. Such terms are also called initialisms. A clearer distinction has also been drawn, by Piles and Algeo, who divided acronyms as a general category into word acronyms pronounced as words, and initialisms sounded out as letters. There is no special term for abbreviations whose pronunciation involves the combination of letter names and words or word-like pronunciations of strings of letters, such as JPEG/DEP/ and MS-DOS/MSDS/. There is also some disagreement as to what to call abbreviations that some speakers pronounce as letters and others pronounce as a word. For example, the terms URL and IRA can be pronounced as individual letters, /URL/N/ARE/, respectively, or as a single word, /RL/N/AR/, respectively. Historical and current use. The spelled-out form of an acronym or initialism is called its expansion. Acronymy, like retronymy, is a linguistic process that has existed throughout history but for which there was little to no naming, conscious attention, or systematic analysis until relatively recent times. Like retronymy, it became much more common in the 20th century than it had formerly been. Early examples in English. Ancient examples of acronymy include the following. During the mid to late 19th century, an acronym disseminating trend spread through the American and European business communities, abbreviating corporation names in places where space was limited for writing, such as on the sides of railroad cars, on the sides of barrels and crates, and on ticker tape and in the small print newspaper stock listings that got their data from it. Some well-known commercial examples dating from the 1890s through 1920s include Nabisco, Esso, and Sunoco. Another driver for the adoption of acronyms was modern warfare with its many highly technical terms. While there is no recorded use of military acronyms in documents dating from the American Civil War, they had become somewhat common in World War I and were very much a part even of the vernacular language of the soldiers during World War II, who themselves were referred to as GIS. Current use. The widespread, frequent use of acronyms across the whole range of registers is a relatively new linguistic phenomenon in most languages, becoming increasingly evident since the mid-20th century. As literacy rates rose, and as advances in science and technology brought with them a constant stream of new terms and concepts, the practice of abbreviating terms became increasingly convenient. The Oxford English Dictionary records the first printed use of the word initialism as occurring in 1899, but it did not come into general use until 1965. Well after acronym had become common. Aids to learning the expansion without leaving a document. By 1943, the term acronym had been used in English to recognize abbreviations that were pronounced as words. For example, the Army offense of being absent without official leave was abbreviated to AWOL. In reports, but when pronounced as a word, it became an acronym. While initial letters are commonly used to form an acronym, the original definition was a word made from the initial letters or syllables of other words, for example UNIVAC from Universal Automatic Computer. Jargon. In English, acronyms pronounced as words may be a 20th century phenomenon. Linguist David Wilton in Word Myths, Debunking Linguistic Urban Legends claims that forming words from acronyms is a distinctly 20th century phenomenon. There is only one known pre-20th century word with an acronymic origin, and it was in vogue for only a short time in 1886. The word is Colindaries or Colinda, an acronym for the Colonial and Indian Exposition held in London in that year. However, although acronymic words seem not to have been employed in general vocabulary before the 20th century, the concept of their formation is treated as effortlessly understood in a Poe story of the 1830s, How to Write a Blackwood Article, which includes the contrived acronym PRETTYBLUEBATCH. The use of Latin and Neo-Latin terms in vernaculars has been pan-European and predates modern English. Some examples of acronyms in this class are as mnemonics. The earliest example of a word derived from an acronym listed by the OED is abjad, formed from the original first four letters of the Arabic alphabet in the late 18th century. Some acrostics predate this, however, such as the Restoration witticism arranging the names of some members of Charles II's Committee for Foreign Affairs to produce the Cabal Ministry. Acronyms are used most often to abbreviate names of organizations in long or frequently referenced terms. The armed forces and government agencies frequently employ acronyms, Some well-known examples from the United States are among the alphabet agencies created by Franklin D. Roosevelt under the New Deal. Business and industry also are prolific coiners of acronyms. The rapid advance of science and technology in recent centuries seems to be an underlying force driving the usage, as new inventions and concepts with multi-word names create a demand for shorter, more manageable names. One representative example, from the U.S. Navy, is COMCRUDSPAC, which stands for Commander, Cruisers Destroyers Pacific. It's also seen as COMCRUDAPAC. Yoba-compatible is used to mean that a term's acronym can be pronounced but is not an offensive word, e.g., when choosing a new name, be sure it is Yoba-compatible. Acronym use has been further popularized by text messaging on mobile phones with short message systems. To fit messages into the 160-character SMS limit, acronyms such as GF, LOL, and DL have become popular. Some prescriptivists disdain texting acronyms and abbreviations as decreasing clarity, or as failure to use pure or proper English. Others point out that language change has happened for thousands of years, and argue that it should be embraced as inevitable, or as innovation that adapts the language to changing circumstances. In this view, the modern practice is just as legitimate as those in proper English of the current generation of speakers, such as the abbreviation of corporation names in places with limited writing space. In formal writing for a broad audience, the expansion is typically given at the first occurrence of the acronym within a given text, for the benefit of those readers who do not know what it stands for. The capitalization of the original term is independent of it being acronymized, being lowercase for a common noun such as frequently asked questions but uppercase for a proper noun such as the United Nations. In addition to expansion at first use, some publications also have a key listing all acronyms used therein and what their expansions are. This is a convenience to readers for two reasons. The first is that if they are not reading the entire publication sequentially, then they may encounter an acronym without having seen its expansion. Having a key at the start or end of the publication obviates skimming over the text searching for an earlier use to find the expansion. The second reason for the key feature is its pedagogical value in educational works such as textbooks. It gives students a way to review the meanings of the acronyms introduced in a chapter after they have done the line-by-line reading, and also a way to quiz themselves on the meanings in addition. This feature enables readers possessing knowledge of the abbreviations not to have to encounter expansions. Acronyms as legendary etymology. Expansion at first use and the abbreviation key feature are aids to the reader that originated in the print era, and they are equally useful in print and online. In addition, the online medium offers yet more aids, such as tooltips, hyperlinks, and rapid search via search engine technology. Orthographic styling. Acronyms often occur in jargon. An acronym may have different meanings in different areas of industry, writing, and scholarship. The general reason for this is convenience and succinctness for specialists, although it has led some to obfuscate the meaning either intentionally, to deter those without such domain-specific knowledge, or unintentionally, by creating an acronym that already existed. Acronyms were used in Rome before the Christian era. For example, the official name for the Roman Empire, and the Republic before it, was abbreviated as SPQR. Inscriptions dating from antiquity, both on stone and on coins, use a lot of abbreviations and acronyms to save room and work. For example, Roman first names, of which there was only a small set, were almost always abbreviated. Common terms were abbreviated too, such as writing just F for filius, meaning son of, a very common part of memorial inscriptions mentioning people. Grammatical markers were abbreviated or left out entirely if they could be inferred from the rest of the text. So-called nomina sacra were used in many Greek biblical manuscripts. The common words God, Jesus, Christ, and some others, would be abbreviated by their first and last letters, marked with an overline. This was just one of many kinds of conventional scribal abbreviation, used to reduce the time-consuming workload of the scribe and save on valuable writing materials. The same convention is still commonly used in the inscriptions on religious icons and the stamps used to mark the Eucharistic bread in Eastern churches. The early Christians in Rome, most of whom were Greek rather than Latin speakers, used the image of a fish as a symbol for Jesus in part because of an acronym. Fish in Greek is ichthys, which was said to stand for eta sigma omicron chi iota sigma tau theta epsilon omicron upsilon sigma omega tau rho. This interpretation dates from the 2nd and 3rd centuries and is preserved in the catacombs of Rome. And for centuries, the Church has used the inscription INRI over the crucifix, which stands for the Latin Jesus Nazarenus Rex Iudiorum. The Hebrew language has a long history of formation of acronyms pronounced as words, stretching back many centuries. The Hebrew Bible is known as Tanakh, an acronym composed from the Hebrew initial letters of its 3 major sections, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. Many rabbinical figures from the Middle Ages onward are referred to in rabbinical literature by their pronounced acronyms, such as Rambam and Rashi from the initial letters of their full Hebrew names, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon and Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. The medical literature has been struggling to control the proliferation of acronyms as their use has evolved from aiding communication to hindering it. This has become such a problem that it is even evaluated at the level of medical academies such as the American Academy of Dermatology. Acronyms are often taught as mnemonic devices. For example, in physics the colors of the visible spectrum are ρ, G, B, IV. They are also used as mental checklists, for example in aviation, GUMPS, which is gas undercarriage mixture propeller seat belts. Other examples of mnemonic acronyms include CAN-SLIM, and PAV-PANIC as well as PEMDAS. AM and P.M, A.D, whose complement in English, BC, is English-sourced, O.K, a term of disputed origin, dating back at least to the early 19th century, now used around the world. It is not uncommon for acronyms to be cited in a kind of false etymology, called a folk etymology, for a word. Such etymologies persist in popular culture but have no factual basis in historical linguistics, and are examples of language-related urban legends. For example, cop is commonly cited as being derived, it is presumed, from constable on patrol, and posh from poured out, starboard home. With some of these specious expansions, the belief that the etymology is acronymic has clearly been tongue-in-cheek among many citers, as with gentlemen only, ladies forbidden for golf, although many other people have uncritically taken it for fact. Taboo words in particular commonly have such false etymologies. Shit from ship/store high in transit or special high-intensity training and fuck from for unlawful carnal knowledge, or fornication under consent/command of the king. Punctuation. Showing the ellipsis of letters. Ellipsis is understood style. Pronunciation-dependent style and periods. In English, abbreviations have traditionally been written with a full stop /period/point in place of the deleted part to show the ellipsis of letters, although the colon and apostrophe have also had this role, and with a space after full stops. In the case of most acronyms, each letter is an abbreviation of a separate word and, in theory, should get its own termination mark. Such punctuation is diminishing with the belief that the presence of all capital letters is sufficient to indicate that the word is an abbreviation. DVD was originally an acronym of the unofficial term digital video disc, but is now stated by the DVD Forum as standing for Digital Versatile Disc. GAO changed the full form of its name from General Accounting Office to Government Accountability Office. GPO changed the full form of its name from Government Printing Office to Government Publishing Office. RAID used to mean Redundant Array of Inexpensive Disks, but is now commonly interpreted as Redundant Array of Independent Disks, WWF. Originally stood for World Wildlife Fund, but now stands for Worldwide Fund for Nature. The UICC, whose initials came from the Romance language versions of its name, changed the English expansion of its name to Union for International Cancer Control so that the English expansion, too, would correspond to the UICC initials. Some influential style guides, such as that of the BBC, no longer require punctuation to show ellipsis, some even proscribe it. Larry Trask, American author of The Penguin Guide to Punctuation, states categorically that, in British English, this tiresome and unnecessary practice is now obsolete. Nevertheless, some influential style guides, many of them American, still require periods in certain instances. For example, the New York Times Guide recommends following each segment with a period when the letters are pronounced individually, as in KGB, but not when pronounced as a word, as in NATO. The logic of this style is that the pronunciation is reflected graphically by the punctuation scheme. When a multiple letter abbreviation is formed from a single word, periods are in general not used, although they may be common in informal usage. TV, for example, may stand for a single word, and is in general spelled without punctuation. Although PS stands for the single word postscript, it is often spelled with periods. XHR stands for XML HTTP request, in which XML is Extensible Markup Language, and HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. POWER stands for Performance Optimization with Enhanced RISC, in which RISC stands for Reduced Instruction Set Computing. VHDL stands for VSIC Hardware Description Language, in which VSIC stands for Very High Speed Integrated Circuit. XSD stands for XML Schema Definition, in which XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. SECS stands for Semi-Equipment Communication Standard, in which SEMI stands for Semiconductor Equipment Manufacturing Industries. AIM stands for AOL Instant Messenger, in which AOL stands for America Online. HASP stood for Houston Automatic Spooling Priority, but spooling itself was an acronym Simultaneous Peripheral Operations Online. The slash is sometimes used to separate the letters in a two-letter acronym, as in N/A, C/O and without. Inconveniently long words used frequently in related contexts can be represented according to their letter count. For example, I-18N abbreviates internationalization, a computer science term for adapting software for worldwide use. The 18 represents the 18 letters that come between the first and the last in internationalization. Localization can be abbreviated L10N, multilingualization M17N, and accessibility A11Y. In addition to the use of a specific number replacing that many letters, the more general X can be used to replace an unspecified number of letters. Examples include CRXN for crystallization and the series familiar to physicians for history, diagnosis, and treatment. There is a question about how to pluralize acronyms. Often a writer will add an S following an apostrophe, as in PCs. However, Kate Turabian, writing about style in academic writings, allows for an apostrophe to form plural acronyms only when an abbreviation contains internal periods or both capital and lowercase letters. Turabian would therefore prefer DVDs and URLs and PhDs. The Modern Language Association and American Psychological Association prohibit apostrophes from being used to pluralize acronyms regardless of periods, whereas the New York Times Style Guide requires an apostrophe when pluralizing all abbreviations regardless of periods. Other conventions. Possessive plurals that also include apostrophes for mere pluralization and periods appear especially complex, for example, the C.ds labels. In some instances, however, an apostrophe may increase clarity, for example, if the final letter of an abbreviation is S, as in SOSs, or when pluralizing an abbreviation that has periods. A particularly rich source of options arises when the plural of an acronym would normally be indicated in a word other than the final word if spelled out in full. A classic example is Member of Parliament, which in plural is Members of Parliament. It is possible then to abbreviate this as MSP, as used by former Australian Prime Minister Ben Chifley. This usage is less common than forms with S at the end, such as MPs, and may appear dated or pedantic. In common usage, therefore, weapons of mass destruction becomes WMDs, prisoners of war becomes POWs, and runs batted in becomes RBIs. The argument that acronyms should have no different plural form is in general disregarded because of the practicality in distinguishing singulars and plurals. This is not the case, however, when the abbreviation is understood to describe a plural noun already. For example, US is short for United States, but not United State. In this case, the options for making a possessive form of an abbreviation that is already in its plural form without a final S may seem awkward, for example, US, U.SS, etc. In such instances, possessive abbreviations are often foregone in favor of simple attributive usage or expanding the abbreviation to its full form and then making the possessive. On the other hand, in speech, the pronunciation United States sometimes is used. Representing plurals and possessives. Case. All caps style. Abbreviations that come from single, rather than multiple, words such as TV are usually pluralized without apostrophes. Most writers feel that the apostrophe should be reserved for the possessive. In some languages, the convention of doubling the letters in the acronym is used to indicate plural words, for example, the Spanish UU, for Estados Unidos. This old convention is still followed for a limited number of English abbreviations, such as SS for saints, pages for the Latin plural of pages, paginae, or MSS for manuscripts. In the case of pages, it derives from the original Latin phrase per procurationem, meaning through the agency of. An English translation alternative is particular pages in a book or document, CPP 8-88. The most common capitalization scheme seen with acronyms is all uppercase, except for those few that have linguistically taken on an identity as regular words, with the acronymous etymology of the words fading into the background of common knowledge, such as has occurred with the words scuba, laser, and radar. These are known as anacronyms. Anacronyms should not be homophonously confused with anacronyms, which are a type of misnomer. Small caps are sometimes used to make the run of capital letters seem less jarring to the reader. For example, the style of some American publications, including The Atlantic Monthly and USA Today, is to use small caps for acronyms longer than 3 letters, thus US and FDR in normal caps, but NATO in small caps. The acronyms AD and BC are often small-capped as well, as in, from 4004 BC to AD 525. Words derived from an acronym by affixing are typically expressed in mixed case, so the root acronym is clear. For example, pre-World War II politics, post-NATO world, DNOS. In some cases a derived acronym may also be expressed in mixed case. For example, messenger RNA and transfer RNA become mRNA and tRNA. Small caps variant. Some publications choose to capitalize only the first letter of acronyms, reserving all caps styling for initialisms, writing the pronounced acronyms NATO and AIDS in mixed case, but the initialisms USA and FBI in all caps. For example, this is the style used in The Guardian, and BBC News typically edits to this style. The logic of this style is that the pronunciation is reflected graphically by the capitalization scheme. Some style manuals also base the letters case on their number. The New York Times, for example, keeps NATO in all capitals, but uses lowercase in UNICEF because it is more than 4 letters, and to style it in caps might look ungainly. While abbreviations typically exclude the initials of short function words, this is not always the case. Sometimes function words are included to make a pronounceable acronym, such as CORE. Sometimes the letters representing these words are written in lower case, such as in the cases of TFL and LOT-R. This usually occurs when the acronym represents a multi-word proper noun. Numbers and names are often represented by digits rather than initial letters, as in 4 gallons or G77. Large numbers may use metric prefixes, as with Y2K for year 2000. Exceptions using initials for numbers include TLA and GOF. Abbreviations using numbers for other purposes include repetitions, such as W3C and T3, pronunciation, such as B2B, and numeronyms, such as I18N. Although many authors of expository writing show a predisposition to capitalizing the initials of the expansion for pedagogical emphasis, this sometimes conflicts with the convention of English orthography, which reserves capitals in the middle of sentences for proper nouns. Enforcing the general convention, most professional editors case-fold such expansions to their standard orthography when editing manuscripts for publication. The justification is that readers are smart enough to figure out where the letters came from, even without their being capitalized for emphasis, and that common nouns do not take capital initials in standard English orthography. Such house styles also usually disfavor bold or italic font for the initial letters. For example, the onset of congestive heart failure or the onset of congestive heart failure if found in an unpublished manuscript would be rewritten as the onset of congestive heart failure in the final published article when following the AMA Manual of Style. Some apparent acronyms or other abbreviations do not stand for anything and cannot be expanded to some meaning. Such pseudo-acronyms may be pronunciation-based, such as barbecue, for barbecue, or canine for canine. Pseudo-acronyms also frequently develop as orphan initialisms. An existing acronym is redefined as a non-acronymous name, severing its link to its previous meaning. For example, the letters of the SAT, a U.S. college entrance test originally dubbed Scholastic Aptitude Test, no longer officially stand for anything. This is common with companies that want to retain brand recognition while moving away from an outdated image. American Telephone and Telegraph became AT&T, Kentucky Fried Chicken became KFC to de-emphasize the role of frying in the preparation of its signature dishes, and British Petroleum became BP. Russia Today has rebranded itself as RT. Genzyme Transgenics Corporation became GTC Biotherapeutics, Inc. in order to reduce perceived corporate risk of sabotage/vandalism by Luddite activists. Pseudo-acronyms may have advantages in international markets. For example, some national affiliates of International Business Machines are legally incorporated as IBM to avoid translating the full name into local languages. Likewise, UBS is the name of the merged Union Bank of Switzerland and Swiss Bank Corporation, and HSBC has replaced the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. Sometimes, companies whose original name gives a clear indication of their place of origin will use acronyms when expanding to foreign markets. For example, Toronto-Dominion Bank continues to operate under the full name in Canada, but its U.S. subsidiary is known as TD Bank, just as Royal Bank of Canada used its full name in Canada, but its now defunct U.S. subsidiary was called RBC Bank. Rebranding can lead to redundant acronym syndrome, as when Trustee Savings Bank became TSB Bank, or when Railway Express Agency became REA Express. A few high-tech companies have taken the redundant acronym to the extreme. For example, ISM Information Systems Management Corp. and SHL System House Ltd. Examples in entertainment include the television shows CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, and Navy, NCIS, where the redundancy was likely designed to educate new viewers as to what the initials stood for. The same reasoning was in evidence when the Royal Bank of Canada's Canadian operations rebranded to RBC Royal Bank, or when Bank of Montreal rebranded their retail banking subsidiary BMO Bank of Montreal. Another common example is RAM memory, which is redundant because RAM includes the initial of the word memory. PIN stands for Personal Identification Number, obviating the second word in PIN number. In this case, its retention may be motivated to avoid ambiguity with the homophonous word PIN. Other examples include ATM machine, EAB Bank, Cable ACE Award, DC Comics, HIV virus, Microsoft's NT technology, and the formerly redundant SAT test, now simply SAT reasoning test. TNN also renamed itself the new TNN for a brief interlude. Mixed case variant. Pronunciation-dependent style and case. Sometimes, the initials continue to stand for an expanded meaning, but the original meaning is simply replaced. Some examples. A backronym is a phrase that is constructed after the fact from a previously existing word. For example, the novelist and critic Anthony Burgess once proposed that the word book ought to stand for BOXOF Organized K Knowledge. A classic real-world example of this is the name of the predecessor to the Apple Macintosh, the Apple Lisa, which was said to refer to a local integrated software architecture, but was actually named after Steve Jobs' daughter, born in 1978. Numerals and constituent words. Acronyms are sometimes contrived, that is, deliberately designed to be especially apt for the thing being named. Some examples of contrived acronyms are USA Patriot, CAN-SPAM, CAPTCHA, and ACT UP. The clothing company French Connection began referring to itself as FCUC, standing for French Connection United Kingdom. The company then created T-shirts and several advertising campaigns that exploit the acronym's similarity to the taboo word fuck. Casing of expansions. Changes to the expanded meaning. Pseudo-acronyms. Redundant acronyms and RIS syndrome. Simple redefining. Backronyms. Contrived acronyms. Macronyms/nested acronyms. Recursive acronyms. Non-English languages. Specific languages. Chinese, Korean, Japanese. The U.S. Department of Defense's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency is known for developing contrived acronyms to name projects, including Resurrect, Nirvana, and DUDE. In July 2010, Wired magazine reported that DARPA announced programs to transform biology from a descriptive to a predictive field of science named Batman and Robin for biochronicity and temporal mechanisms arising in nature and robustness of biologically inspired networks, a reference to the Batman and Robin comic book superheroes. The short-form names of clinical trials and other scientific studies constitute a large class of acronyms that includes many contrived examples, as well as many with a partial rather than complete correspondence of letters to expansion components. These trials tend to have full names that are accurately descriptive of what the trial is about but are thus also too long to serve practically as names within the syntax of a sentence. So a short name is also developed, which can serve as a syntactically useful handle and also provide at least a degree of mnemonic reminder as to the full name. Examples widely known in medicine include the All-Hat trial and the Charm trial. The fact that RIS syndrome is often involved, as well as that the letters often don't entirely match, have sometimes been pointed out by annoyed researchers preoccupied by the idea that because the archetypal form of acronyms originated with one-to-one letter matching, there must be some moral impropriety in their ever deviating from that form. However, the raison d'être of clinical trial acronyms, as with gene and protein symbols, is simply to have a syntactically usable and recallable short name to complement the long name that is often syntactically unusable and not memorized. It is useful for the short name to give a reminder of the long name, which supports the reasonable censure of cutesy examples that provide little to no hint of it. But beyond that reasonably close correspondence, the short name's chief utility is in functioning cognitively as a name, rather than being a cryptic and forgettable string, albeit faithful to the matching of letters. However, other reasonable critiques have been that it is irresponsible to mention trial acronyms without explaining them at least once by providing the long names somewhere in the document, and that the proliferation of trial acronyms has resulted in ambiguity, such as 3 different trials all called Aspect, which is another reason why failing to explain them somewhere in the document is irresponsible in scientific communication. At least one study has evaluated the citation impact and other traits of acronym-named trials compared with others, finding both good aspects and potential flaws. Some acronyms are chosen deliberately to avoid a name considered undesirable. For example, Verliet in Berlin, a German telenovela, was first intended to be Alsner aus Liebe, but was changed to avoid the resultant acronym ANAL. Likewise, the Computer Literacy and Internet Technology qualification is known as CLIT, rather than CLIT. In Canada, the Canadian Conservative Reform Alliance was quickly renamed to the Canadian Reform Conservative Alliance when its opponents pointed out that its initials spelled crap. Two Irish institutes of technology chose different acronyms from other institutes when they were upgraded from regional technical colleges. Tralee RDC became the Institute of Technology Tralee, as opposed to Tralee Institute of Technology. Galway RDC became Galway Mayo Institute of Technology, as opposed to Galway Institute of Technology. The charity sports organization Team in Training is known as TNT and not TIT. Technological Institute of Textile and Sciences is still known as TITS. George Mason University was planning to name their law school the Antonin Scalia School of Law in honor of the late Antonin Scalia, only to change it to the Antonin Scalia Law School later. A macronym, or nested acronym, is an acronym in which one or more letters stand for acronyms themselves. The word macronym is a portmanteau of macro and acronym. Some examples of macronyms are: some macronyms can be multiply-nested. The second-order acronym points to another one further down a hierarchy. In an informal competition run by the magazine New Scientist, a fully documented specimen was discovered that may be the most deeply nested of all. RARS is the Regional ATOFS Retransmission Service. ATOFS is Advanced TOVS. TOVS is Tyro's Operational Vertical Sounder, and TIROS is Television Infrared Observational Satellite. Fully expanded, RARS might thus become Regional Advanced Television Infrared Observational Satellite Operational Vertical Sounder Retransmission Service. However, to say that RARS stands directly for that string of words, or can be interchanged with it in syntax, is a prescriptive misapprehension rather than a linguistically accurate description. The true nature of such a term is closer to anacronymic than to being interchangeable like simpler acronyms are. The latter are fully reducible in an attempt to spell everything out and avoid all abbreviations, but the former are irreducible in that respect. They can be annotated with parenthetical explanations, but they cannot be eliminated from speech or writing in any useful or practical way. Just as the words laser and radar function as words in syntax and cognition without a need to focus on their acronymic origins, terms such as RARS and CHA2DS2VASC score are irreducible in natural language. If they are purged, the form of language that is left may conform to some imposed rule, but it cannot be described as remaining natural. Similarly, protein and gene nomenclature, which uses symbols extensively, includes such terms as the name of the NACT protein domain, which reflects the symbols of some proteins that contain the domain NAIP, C2TA, HETE, and TP1 but is not syntactically reducible to them. The name is thus itself more symbol than acronym, and its expansion cannot replace it while preserving its function in natural syntax as a name within a clause clearly parsable by human readers or listeners. A special type of macronym, the recursive acronym, has letters whose expansion refers back to the macronym itself. One of the earliest examples appears in the Hacker's Dictionary as MUNG, which stands for Mung Until No Good. Some examples of recursive acronyms are: in English language discussions of languages with syllabic or logographic writing systems, acronyms describe the short forms that take selected characters from a multi-character word. For example, in Chinese, university is usually abbreviated simply as when used with the name of the institute. So Peking University is commonly shortened to by also only taking the first character of Peking, the northern capital. In some cases, however, other characters than the first can be selected. For example, the local short form of Hong Kong University uses Kong rather than Hong. There are also cases where some longer phrases are abbreviated drastically, especially in Chinese politics, where proper nouns were initially translated from Soviet Leninist terms. For instance, the full name of China's highest ruling council, the Politburo Standing Committee, is Standing Committee of the Central Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China. The term then reduced the Communist Party of China part of its name through acronyms, then the Standing Committee part, again through acronyms, to create. Alternatively, it omitted the Communist Party part altogether, creating Politburo Standing Committee, and eventually just Standing Committee. The PSC's members' full designations are Member of the Standing Committee of the Central Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China. This was eventually drastically reduced to simply Chengui, with the term Rushang used increasingly for officials destined for a future seat on the PSC. In another example, the word can be broken into four parts: equals the whole nation, equals people, equals representatives, equals conference. Yet, in its short form, only the first characters from the second and the fourth parts are selected, the first part and the third part are simply ignored. In describing such abbreviations, the term initialism is inapplicable. Many proper nouns become shorter and shorter over time. For example, the CCTV New Year's Gala, whose full name is literally read as China Central Television Spring Festival Joint Celebration Evening Gala, was first shortened to Spring Festival Joint Celebration Evening Gala, but eventually referred to as simply Chunwan. Along the same vein, Zhongguo Zhongyang Dianshi Tai was reduced to Yangshi in the mid-2000s. Many aspects of academics in Korea follow similar acronym patterns as Chinese, owing to the language's commonalities, like using the word for big or great, i.e. day, to refer to universities. They can be interpreted similar to American university appellations, such as UPenn or Texas Tech. Some acronyms are shortened forms of the school's name, like how Hongik University is shortened to Hongdae or Hongyu. Other acronyms can refer to the university's main subject, e.g. Korea National University of Education is shortened to Gyeohyundae. Other schools use a Koreanized version of their English acronym. The Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology is referred to as KAIST in both English and Korean. The three most prestigious schools in Korea are known as SKY, combining the first letter of their English names. In addition, the College Scholastic Ability Test is shortened to Sunung. The Japanese language makes extensive use of abbreviations, but only some of these are acronyms. Chinese-based words uses similar acronym formation to Chinese, like T-Day for TKY Daigaku. In some cases alternative pronunciations are used, as in Psyche 4, from Saitama and Tikyo, rather than Sai-T. Non-Chinese foreign borrowings are instead frequently abbreviated as clipped compounds, rather than acronyms, using several initial sounds. This is visible in katakana transcriptions of foreign words, but is also found with native words. For example, the Pokémon media franchise's name originally stood for Pocket Monsters, which is still the long form of the name in Japanese, and Duopuro stands for word processor. To a greater degree than English does, German tends toward acronyms that use initial syllables rather than initial single letters, although it uses many of the latter type as well. Some examples of the syllabic type are Gestapo rather than GSP, FLAC rather than FAK, Kripo rather than KP. The extension of such contraction to a pervasive or whimsical degree has been mockingly labeled Akufi. Examples of Akufi include Vokuhila and the mocking of Adolf Hitler's title as Grafaz. It is common to take more than just one initial letter from each of the words composing the acronym. Regardless of this, the abbreviation sign Gershaim is always written between the second last and last letters of the non-inflected form of the acronym, even if by this it separates letters of the same original word. Examples. An example that takes only the initial letters from its component words is: in inflected forms, the abbreviation sign Gershaim remains between the second last and last letters of the non-inflected form of the acronym. There is also a widespread use of acronyms in Indonesia in every aspect of social life. For example, the Golkar political party stands for Partai Gol Ongan Karya, Monas stands for Monumen Nas Ional, the Angkot public transport stands for Angkutan Kota, Warnet stands for Warung Internet, and many others. Some acronyms are considered formal, while many more are considered informal, slang or colloquial. The capital's metropolitan area, Jabodetabek, is another infamous acronym. This stands for Jakarta Bogor Depok Tan Garang Bek ACI. Many highways are also named by the acronym method, e.g. Jalan Tol Jagorawi and Perbaliyunyi, Joglo Semar. In some languages, especially those that use certain alphabets, many acronyms come from the governmental use, particularly in the military and law enforcement services. The Indonesian military and Indonesian police are infamous for heavy acronyms use. Examples include the Kopassus, Kopaska, Kodam, Serka, Akmil and many other terms regarding ranks, units, divisions, procedures, etc. Heavy acronym use by Indonesians makes it difficult for foreigners and learners of Bahasa Indonesia to seek information and news in Indonesian media. Acronyms that use parts of words are commonplace in Russian as well, e.g., for. There are also initialisms, such as. Another Russian acronym combines two initials and three letters of the final word. It stands for. Historically, OTMA was an acronym sometimes used by the daughters of Emperor Nicholas II of Russia and his consort, Alexandra Fyodorovna, as a group nickname for themselves, built from the first letter of each girl's name in the order of their births: Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. In Swahili, acronyms are common for naming organizations such as TUKI, which stands for Taasisi ya Uchunguzi wa Kiswahili. Multiple initial letters are often drawn together, as seen more in some languages than others. In Vietnamese, which has an abundance of compound words, initialisms are very commonly used for both proper and common nouns. Examples include TP.HCM, THPT, CLB, CSDL, NXB, OBIS, and CTTVN. Longer examples include CHXHCNVN and MTDTGPMNVN. Long initialisms have become widespread in legal contexts in Vietnam. It is also common for a writer to coin an ad hoc initialism for repeated use in an article. Each letter in an initialism corresponds to one morpheme, that is, one syllable. When the first letter of a syllable has a tone mark or other diacritic, the diacritic may be omitted from the initialism, for example NA or NA with acute for NG nam A and LMCA or LMCA for Lin Min Chao. The letter is often replaced by W in initialisms to avoid confusion with U, for example UBTMKN or UBTMKN for Y Ban Trung NGMTTRNT Cook Vietnam. Initialisms are purely a written convenience, being pronounced the same way as their expansions. As the names of many Vietnamese letters are disyllabic, it would be less convenient to pronounce an initialism by its individual letters. Acronyms pronounced as words are rare in Vietnamese, occurring when an acronym itself is borrowed from another language. Examples include CHE, a respelling of the French acronym SIDA, VOA, a literal reading of the English initialism for Voice of America, and NASA, borrowed directly from the English acronym. As in Chinese, many compound words can be shortened to the first syllable when forming a longer word. For example, the term VietCNG is derived from the first syllables of Vietnam and CNGSN. This mechanism is limited to Sino-Vietnamese vocabulary. Unlike with Chinese, such shortened words are considered portmanteau words or blend words rather than acronyms or initialisms, because the Vietnamese alphabet still requires each component word to be written as more than one character. In languages where nouns are declined, various methods are used. An example is Finnish, where a colon is used to separate inflection from the letters. The process above is similar to how, in English, hyphens are used for clarity when prefixes are added to acronyms, thus pre-NATO policy. In languages such as Scottish Gaelic and Irish, where lenition is commonplace, acronyms must also be modified in situations where case and context dictate it. In the case of Scottish Gaelic, a lowercase h is added after the initial consonant, for example, BBC Scotland in the genitive case would be written as BHBC Alba, with the acronym pronounced VBC. Likewise, the Gaelic acronym for television is TBH, pronounced TV, as in English. His first glance at the Paris German news told Wiesener that this new paper was nothing like the old PG. They can call it the PGN if they like, he thought, but that's the only difference. PGNN, what's the word for words like that, made out of initials? My memory is beginning to fail me. Just the other day there was a technical expression I couldn't remember. I must be growing old. PG or PGN, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. PGENN. It's an acronym, that's what it is. That's what they call words made up of initials. So I remember it after all, that's at least something. For acronym used in 1921 or 1922, giving an example of AGFA film, Brockhaus Handbuch des Wissens in wir Banden. Leipzig, F. A. Brockhaus, V1, p. 37. Acronyms. A number of commentators believe that acronyms can be differentiated from other abbreviations in being pronounceable as words. Dictionaries, however, do not make this distinction because writers in general do not. The powder metallurgy industry has officially adopted the acronym P/M parts precision metal molding, January 1966. Users of the term acronym make no distinction between those pronounced as words, and those pronounced as a series of characters. Jean Praninska's, Trade Name Creation, 1968, it is not J.C.B.'s fault that its name, let alone its acronym, is not a household word among European scholars. Times Literary Sup. February 5, 1970, The confusion in the Pentagon about abbreviations and acronyms. Words formed from the first letters of other words. Bernard Weinraub, N.Y. Times, December 11, 1978. The limitations of the term being not widely known to the general public, acronym is also often applied to abbreviations that are familiar but are not pronounceable as words. Thus EC, FBI, and VCR. Such terms are also called initialisms. German, Hebrew, Indonesian, Russian, Swahili, Vietnamese. General grammatical considerations. Declension. NU stands for News Not Unix, LAME stands for Lame Ain't an MP3 Encoder, PHP stands for PHP, Hypertext Preprocessor, WINE stands for Wine is not an emulator, HERD stands for Herd of Unix replacing daemons, where herd itself stands for herd of interfaces representing depth. An acronym is pronounced as a word, NATO Natun into NATO, NAS Alta from NASA. An acronym is pronounced as letters, EU Hun into EU. An acronym is interpreted as words, EU and into EU. Lenition. Extremes. Notes.